My oh my, what a time to be alive. We are fully inside of the governing body's brains here. This is like the babushka doll where you just go layer by layer by layer by layer. We're like on that last layer now. Governing body, they're fully unhinged. We have a instance where they are about to demonstrate that they are looking forward to, excited about killing people. Millions of people for the crime of disagreeing with them. There's only a smile on my face because this man is more delusional than whiskey during the Prohibition. There's no chance of any of this coming through true, so it's kind of comedy at this point. But how fascinating this talk is. Well, I say how fascinating this talk is, but I mean parts of it. But I have spiced it up and added the old zest of a lemon to lift the flavors of this talk and take it beyond what Samuel Hurd could have done by himself. So I do hope you enjoy. Don't forget to drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. With all of that being said, I'm excited, you're excited. Let's do this thing.
I spoke to Jehovah just before I stepped out here, and I asked him, please, don't abandon me. If I've ever needed you, I need you now. Why? Well, it's because of all of these beautiful sheep that I have the privilege to speak to for 19 minutes. So I want to make the most of these 19 minutes because sometimes we have to make adjustments. Now, you may have heard of a few adjustments in our understanding of things already today, and there could be more adjustments that will have to be made later on.
Sometimes adjustments have to be made. We just kept on saying it over and over and over again. But interesting how when he comes out, he just says, oh, I spoke to Jehovah just before, just casually spoke to God and asked him for help. And anyway, but it's funny how that gets a laugh just because he's smiles and says, and boy, do I need it. You have a real humdinger there, but let's see what kind of adjustments Watchtower has in mind.
Now, you may recall that we used to think a certain way some 10 years ago about the following matter. We felt that some of the anointed would survive Armageddon and move right on into the paradise with the other sheep and maybe stay there for a given time and then be brought to life in heaven.
I know a joke.
Yeah, okay.
A guy goes into a bar.
Is it just me, or does it seem like he is really struggling with his talk? I don't know, just from the very beginning, he's talking about, we used to think that the anointed would move right on past the Great Tribulation, blah, 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 who cares? But he just seems like he's struggling a lot.
We can't see it until Jehovah puts the light on it. And what I'm about to reveal to you today, Jehovah is behind it. Not the governing body, not any human here on the earth, but Jehovah God. He helps us to see things.
What does that sentence even mean? It makes no sense whatsoever. I'm about to reveal something to you, but I'm not the one revealing it.
And what I'm about to reveal to you today.
Trust in me.
Well, who's revealing it then? It's something that I can't actually demonstrate or prove. Cool. That sounds great. Let's hear what you have to say about this new light there, bucko. Bucko. Hey, that's a fun thing to say. Maybe I'll start saying that now. Hey, Bucko.
One of the worst we've ever heard.
Now, you may recall Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 through 31. You read it many times. I have too. But notice what it says, even though we felt a little different earlier on when we read it. Verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Now remember this, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will beat themselves in grief, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a great trumpet sound. Now note the following. And they will gather his chosen ones together from the four winds, from one extremity of the heavens to the other extremity. Now do you see the point? We understand now that all of Christ's anointed brothers will be in heaven with him before on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a great trumpet sound. Now note the following. And they will gather his chosen ones together from the four winds, from one extremity of the heavens to the other extremity. Now, do you see the point? We understand now that all of Christ's anointed brothers will be in heaven with him before Armageddon starts.
Well, at least we have a governing body member attempting to read the Bible. Now, his reading was a little bit slow and tedious, so we had to speed it up, but it's okay. We can all listen to it in double time and understand it, I think, quite well. But here's the big, huge, giant reveal. Whoa! They're already going to be in heaven before Armageddon. Woo! The crowd goes wild. New light. Exciting.
And this is exciting. We think so because of a few reasons. And here are a few. But a few of the other sheep have expressed a concern on this subject. They have said that, does this new understanding mean that we will lose all the anointed Christians, including the governing body, just when we need them the most? Will we feel abandoned in our time of need?
I guess the title and thumbnail for this is Sam Hurd's Ego Reaches New Heights. What is this man talking about? He's projecting what other people might think. So he's projecting and saying, might you be scared, you other sheep? Might you be nervous? Oh, we need the governing body here the absolute most. What are we ever going to do?
What are we going to do?
That's what he thinks that ordinary witnesses will be saying to themselves when fireballs are coming down from the earth and this is the Great Tribulation, so they're being shipped off and they're banned worldwide and Satan's all-out attack against Jehovah's people. And during all of this like supernatural crazy shenanigans, he's thinking that people will be worried about whether or not Samuel Hurd is going to be able to jump on camera and give them food at the proper time. They are the most important people within God's organization. Holy moly, I'll say it again. They're the most important people in God's one true organization. And before you know, there might have been some modicum of humility here, but poof, that is out the window. So hats off to you, man. You're just creating content here, man. I said man twice. I should have said bucko. That would have been a good time to add in bucko.
Well, let me reassure you that you will not be abandoned. And that's what this talk is all about. You need not to think that you will be abandoned because of the anointed not being in your midst any longer. So we're going to discuss 3 questions. And here they are if you're writing things down. Number 1, what will not happen when the last of the anointed leave the earthly scene? And number 2, how do we know that such things will not happen? What will happen? So we're going to look at these questions. First, then, what will not happen?
For those of you taking notes, here are the 3 things. What won't happen, what will not, why not happen, will not, will happen when, if that happens. For those of you taking notes.
Well, I'd like to tell you very briefly 2 sad stories to illustrate what will not happen. Now, here's sad story number 1. Do you remember Jehovah? He was a faithful high priest, one of the best. When he died, he was given an unusual honor. He was buried with the kings. During his life, he protected the young king Jehoash and helped him to be a good king who stayed faithful to Jehovah. But when old Jehoiada died, the young king soon went bad. He listened to wicked princes, and he turned away from Jehovah. That's sad story number 1. On its heels, we have sad story number 2.
Anakin, you're breaking my heart. You're going down a path I cannot follow.
You're breaking my heart. You're going down a path I can't follow.
Remember that the Apostle John took great joy in his spiritual children. He was a good influence on them. He helped many Christians to remain faithful. But what happened when John died? Well, he was the sole surviving apostle, the last restraint against apostasy. So after John passed off the scene, it was not long before something happened. What was it? What happened when John died? Well, the last restraint against apostasy. He was the last restraint. And now he's gone. So after John passed off the earthly scene, it was not long before apostasy spread like wildfire. And within a few decades, the Christian congregation went off into captivity in Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion. Now, why mention those sad stories?
I might be keying in on a different or unique point here, but I know what you're probably all kind of thinking exactly what I was thinking first time I watched this is, talking about apostates again. Interesting, how he talks about them. But what I found interesting was how he says that within a few decades, the apostasy had fully taken over. And I find that interesting because if you just go back into Watchtower's history and just say, let's reset this a few decades or go back a few decades, does this organization even remotely resemble what it is today? And putting aside like modern changes that would just happen over time, like, adapting to the internet and stuff like that. But as far as like the doctrine and the quality of the material or the research or maybe some of the transparency, all of these things, I think that if you went back a couple of decades and asked a governing body member, this is going to be Watchtower in, 30 years, what would that person say?
Cannot be serious!
They would be like, there's no way. Like, it's so fundamentally different. So I just found that to be really interesting, how he mentions that it would only take a few decades to enter into apostasy when he knows full well just how much the organization has changed, and therefore it could be seen as the exact thing that he's describing. Within a few years, going into a religion going in a completely different direction. Interesting.
Now, here's the reason. Some may wonder, in our midst today, Christian congregation, what's going to happen when all the anointed are taken to heaven? Will the great crowd be left in the lurch? Will they stray into some kind of trouble? Maybe even apostasy? Well, what do you think? Have you heard any signs of that already? Well, here's the answer. No, they're not going to stray into apostasy. Absolutely not. Those Bible accounts actually teach us what will not happen. And that brings us to the second question.
If this seems very incoherent and just impossible to follow, I mean, not impossible to follow, but it feels like he's struggling. If you think that it might be because I'm editing it in some way or I'm like skipping big parts or anything, it's not. It's just, I almost feel bad for laughing now when he's talking because I feel like he's really, really struggling up there to stay on track. And that's coming from someone that is constantly struggling to stay on track because I'm always like, oh, shiny things. And I get talking and distract really quick. But I just feel like he's struggling with his words and what his next thought is. And his pace is so painfully slow. Trying to build this dramatic scene of, well, what's going to happen when everyone, are you going to feel abandoned when the governing body and the anointed all go to heaven? Would they turn to apostasy? I don't even know what he's attempting or trying to say or why it's trying to be dramatic with it by slowing down so much. It's very odd and confusing. So maybe we shouldn't laugh because then we'll be bad people. So no more laughing. You laugh, you lose. You're a fool. We're starting the counter now. You laugh, you lose.
How do we know that such things will not happen? The answer has a lot to do with when we live.
Sorry, Rod, what was that?
Whiskey.
So you mean whiskey?
What?
You're saying it weird.
Saying what weird?
All of it.
Where do you get off?
I just don't get why you're saying it that way.
Why I'm saying what way?
Forget it.
I will forget it.
We do not live in ancient Israel. I don't see anyone dressed like an Israelite. None of you brothers wear skirts. Oh, there's one. No, there's not. So, no, we don't live in ancient Israel. Now, you may wonder, why does that matter? Because that nation was heading for trouble from its early days. In Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 29, Moses uttered this inspired prophecy about those rebellious people. This is how it reads. I well know that after my death, you will surely act wickedly and turn aside from the way about which I have commanded you. Now, Moses' words came true many times, not just once. Finally, Jehovah had to cast off those wicked people. So when King Jehoash went bad, he was just acting like many other kings of Judah and Israel. Today, things are different among God's people. Keep in mind, we do not live at the end of the 1st century CE. Now, why does that not matter? Remember in Matthew 13, when his illustration of the wheat and the weeds.
The wheat and the weeds. It doesn't stop. This was a little bit longer of a clip than I guess I've normally been keeping in there, but I just thought it was interesting how after he got lost when he was trying to make his joke about I don't see anyone in skirts or something, he got completely lost in the sauce and had to just go straight back to his notes, and then he was fine, read his scripture, and ever since he got lost, he has not strayed from his notes other than to give a little note of emphasis at the ends of sentences. That way it makes it more powerful whenever you say such things like the wheat and the wheats. I just thought it was really evident that I don't know if he is capable of getting up there and giving a talk without notes. Hey, take it from someone that doesn't use notes. I get lost in the sauce all the time, so I'm the least person that should be pointing this out. But at least I'm self-aware, and I don't write propaganda pieces about why I'm one of the best speakers in the world, because I know I'm not. I'm very well of my own limitations. Anyway, let us wrap this up and continue. Why are we wrapping it up? I don't know.
Jesus had foretold that a great apostasy would take place. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul confirmed that Jesus' prophecy was already beginning to come true in the 1st century. Peter and John verified the same in their writings. In the 2nd century CE, the Christian congregation was corrupted and went off into spiritual captivity to Babylon the Great. So Jesus' inspired prophecy was fulfilled. It came true. However, today, things are very different among God's people, much different. At what time are we living? Well, we said not back then. Well, you know the answer to that. We're blessed to be living in a special time period.
I honestly don't even know what the point of watching the rest of this talk is. At what time are we living right now? Well, it's not back then. Who is he talking to? When they do the pan-outs, I am certain they're not panning out to a group of kindergartners, like, eating their crayons and, like, doing spitballs and straws and crying over their Capri Suns. These are grown adults. Most of them look like they were in their, 50s and 60s? And he's talking... What time are we living in? Well, it's not back then, as I said, so what time is it? Now? Current. Yes. Yes is the answer for me, please. What time are we living? Yes, please, one for me. Oh, my Lord.
And this began as far back as 1914. It's more than just the last days of this old system of things. Well, why is that? Notice what the Bible says. Acts chapter 3, verse 21. It says it's also called the times of restoration of all things. Now, let the word restoration linger in your mind. Why does that matter? We're living in the times of restoration of all things. Because pure worship has been restored. We're bathing in it. And the worship of Jehovah will never be corrupted, ever again, for all eternity.
This is one thing that he says that is absolutely correct. The worship of Jehovah will never be tainted. And the reason we can say that is because to the people he is speaking to, it's very true. whatever the governing body members say, even if it contradicts directly something they said before, and then they move back to the thing that they previously said before that they had forgotten that was a contradiction of the thing that once was, even if that happens, it can't be wrong. It's an unfalsifiable proposition. We speak for God. How do you know you speak for God? Because God told us. And that is where this leads to sentences like this. But hey, at least we can be comforted in knowing that we will always have the truth and an organization that represents that truth on the earth. Pretty cool. Did you see that eye contact? Not bad, huh? I was trying. Purposefully. On purpose.
Now remember our second question. How do we know that when the anointed are taken to heaven, the great crowd won't drift away into trouble? How do we know that they won't rebel the way Jehoash did when Jehoiada died, or drift off into apostasy the way the second century Christians did after the last of the apostles died off, John? Well, we know. It's just a matter of turning the page. And the answer is, because we do not live in ancient Israel, and we do not live in the 2nd century CE.
Yeah, if those notes were gone, he would be absolutely lost. No chance of even forming a coherent thought. Not even pretending, not even faking it, not even knowing the answer to the question he just asked, to stall for long enough to turn the page. And I get, yeah, your hands might be shaky, whatever, nerves, whatever the case might be, that's fine. But you can like calmly compose yourself and try and, do the page, but he can't even like pretend. I would assume that he knows what's on the next page, but apparently it's just not clicking like it used to, I guess. I don't know. But it is funny that it induces a laugh. And then it's like, okay, now the big reveal. He's going to tell us the thing that isn't, or the thing that was, but I thought we're on the third point, but now he's going back to the second point. And he says, we're not in ancient Israel, and we're not... You've already said that. You've wasted the last minute and a half flipping a page and forgetting what you were saying. And you just said the same thing that you just got done saying. Did you flip them to the right page? I don't even know what's going on with this talk. It's just an absolute debacle.
We live in a wonderful time of what? Restoration. When Jehovah has guaranteed us that no weapon formed against us will succeed. Now, our third question. What will happen when the anointed are taken to heaven? Well, try to imagine that time. Give you a second. It's over. The Great Tribulation is underway. Babylon the Great, the world empire, false religion is destroyed first. Think of it. Events that God's organization has prepared us for over many decades are happening before our eyes. Then comes something else we have been told to expect. What's that? Sometime during the Great Tribulation and before the war of Armageddon, the remaining ones of Christ's anointed are taken to heaven. What do you think will happen next? Will the great crowd wander about, lost and confused, like sheep without a shepherd? Of course not. Remember, Jesus is the shepherd. He will never fail to do his job. Keep in mind that the anointed are not the head of our organization. Jesus is. And we hope all parents today raising children will teach them that fact.
It's been a few times now where I thought that it looked like they edited something or they switched something up, and before I just thought it was because I'm watching it like in my editing software, because then I can like make cuts to it and then just intersect. It's just easier from an editing standpoint. Anyway, I just thought it was like my computer scuffing, or maybe I was rendering something or downloading something at the same time as I was watching it, and but no, that was like the clearest example where they did go in and make cuts and edits. And someone made a comment on one of the previous videos that this was an edited version. And now I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't really have any reason to think that's the case. But now I absolutely have every reason to think that this has been redacted in some way or another. So I guess I'd be kind of curious to know exactly what the differences are. So if anyone out there in the internet land has originals, then hey, send those over to me. But unfortunately, this will probably be like the third one that comes out. So I'll already have released 3 videos by the time. So this is all pointless.
That's undergoing. The governing body has been training men of the other sheep to take the lead for many decades now. We're familiar with the many schools to train elders and missionaries and traveling overseers and branch personnel. In addition to that, the governing body has personally been training helpers to the various committees of the governing body. These faithful men are right now carrying a very heavy load of responsibility. Believe me, as a member of the governing body, I can say for the rest of us, we need the helpers that Jehovah has given us. We pray for them every day. And they're well prepared to continue in this work, caring for Christ's sheep under the direction of Jesus himself, the head of the congregation.
I did cut a bit out there just because he goes and gives 3 scriptural examples of how Jehovah used a person to lead his people. And I was like, okay, I think we get where you're going with this. You're always training somebody. So then he's like, the governing body, we've been training these people, and there's all these schools, and yada, 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 yada. At the very end, though, what was that expression that he gave? What was that tone of voice? Because it sounded like reluctance, sort of maybe begrudgingly saying something. Like, and they'll be well prepared to care for the faithful sheep when their time comes. Like, I didn't understand. Was he dealing with his own cognitive dissonance in that he knows that he doesn't have too many years left, and that he's probably going to go and die before he actually sees any of the things that he's talking about? Was this a momentary slip-up in him becoming self-aware as he looked up from his script and thought to himself, yeah, these guys are going to be ruling the organization after I die? I wonder. I'm very, very, very curious. We could never know for sure, or we'd have to get someone trained in the art of dissecting people's facial expressions and whatnot. I'm just a guy with a cat.
Now, what is the point? Simply this. When the anointed are taken to heaven near the very end of the Great Tribulation, but before Armageddon, there will be no interruption of pure worship here on the earth. Pure worship will keep right on going. So thank Jehovah for the leadership of Jesus Christ. None of God's worshipers in heaven or on earth will miss a beat. Yes, there will be an attack from Gog and Magog, but it will not get very far. It's going to fail. It will not stop the great crowd from worshiping Jehovah and looking to him to rescue them. And what a rescuer he will prove to be. Now, how we answer the third question? Well, partly. We know what will happen to the great crowd when the anointed are taken to heaven, but that may still leave us wondering, what about the anointed? What will they do after they depart the earthly scene? We want to know. Well, the Bible answers that directly.
I think one of the funnier things is when I start feeling bad about laughing at Samuel Hurd, because he just kind of appears to be a foolish old man that doesn't really know what's going on and can't actually capably give this talk without reading it word for word. The witnesses that are listening to it in the audience, when I stop laughing, that's when they start laughing. Like, I find it less entertaining, and I start almost feeling bad for him up there, clearly struggling in order to handle this assignment that he has, or he's given himself, who knows. But why are they all of a sudden now laughing? Now it's funny. So when he's just reading from his script, I guess that's the things that I find entertaining because they're ridiculous, but that's where they're really taking rigorous notes. And if he's struggling to get a piece of paper and he can't, and trying to make a joke about it, like, to me, I guess that's just not funny. That's just sad. But it's really interesting that the witnesses are now the ones laughing at him.
At Revelation 17, we are able to learn in verse 14 that the political elements of this world will foolishly battle with the Lamb. They will lose, of course. The verse says the Lamb will conquer them. And who will help him? The verse continues. Also, those with him who are called and chosen and faithful will do so. Now, who are called, chosen, and faithful? At that time, it will be the resurrected anointed. So when the anointed are called to heaven, one of the first assignments is to fight. Yeah.
What? What is happening right now? One of the first assignments they'll get is to fight. Yeah. He sounds really excited. He sounds really happy and yeah, boy. He sounds so ecstatic at the prospect of killing people. Here he's been talking about apostates, and no one will ever want to go away from the congregation. No one will ever turn away from the congregation. No one will. It's not like the past was before. That will never happen. In the context of saying that, and now one of the first assignments when we go to heaven is to fight, what he said before turns into kind of a threat. Oh, I know. You wouldn't go and be an apostate now, would you? And now one of our first assignments is going to be a fight. Yeah, boy. I find this shocking, absolutely shocking, that he has the audacity to just pull this out of his butt. And this is the thing that he's going to latch on to, which is purely an idea in his head, because there's no necessarily scriptural basis to any of this. It's just what he has come up with in his head. Oh, Lord, this is painful. This is pain. This is the face of pain.
Now, that's interesting. Some of us were fighters before we became true Christians. Some even served in various branches of the military. Didn't they, Brother Morris? Some were Green Berets. Not Brother Morris. But then we became Christians. We learned the way of peace, and we let go of such warfare. Figuratively speaking, we pulled the pin on our last hand grenade and tossed it into the air, killing no one or nothing. Just a loud ka-boom. But in heaven, we will serve along with Christ and his holy angels, waging the final war against God's enemies. So if you've ever thought that you might feel left in the lurch after the anointed are taken to heaven, think of this. On earth, none of us Christians are allowed to fight. Many of us anointed ones are too old to fight, even if we were allowed to. But in heaven, we will be mighty spirit creatures, fighting alongside our warrior king, Jesus Christ. Believe me, we can and will do you significant more good in heaven than we ever could as imperfect humans here on this earth. Well, I'm not done, but I should be.
So much to say, so little time, honestly. First off, because I've been commenting on it, I still cannot get, like, the enthusiasm that he's trying to present here. I don't understand it, because when someone's sitting there just doing this, and they're just reading from a piece of paper, like if all of my videos were just me doing this, and just like looking, I mean, I know I always am looking around, but if it's just doing this and only changing the sound of my voice, then you might think,
This would be some very good content. It's actually harder to ad-lib when I'm looking at myself. Anyway.
I think he's just a really bad presenter of information. I don't find it necessarily compelling. So the fact that he's getting roaring applause is quite staggering. But on a different note, what is this about being ready to fight and looking forward and wanting to now? Yeah, we're too old and we're not allowed to, but gosh, I'm like that crazed fighter that just did a bunch of cocaine and is sitting in the corner like, let me at him, ah. Like, what is this? Like, what is going on in his mind? It's like he pictures himself as like Brad Pitt from Troy or something, like just gonna get in there with a sword and he's ready to just absolutely mess some people up and kill all of God's enemies. This man is excited at the prospect of killing billions of people. Probably the more the merrier. I can see them in their governing body meetings, you know, like, hey, do you think we'll be able to keep a tally and see who can kill the most apostates? Like, are they like already trying to target us right now? Like, oh, I can't wait to get my hands on him. Oh boy, I've been wanting to wring his neck for years. Oh, hot dog. I really, really, really find this interesting and so silly. And to be in the audience during this, how would that make me feel? If I'm sitting there, witness Wally, put on the old witness hat, and I'm sitting there and I'm hearing this, what would I be thinking? I guess there would be part of me that would be comforted by the idea of, oh, well, we're always going to be taken care of by Jehovah. You know, he would never let us down. But I think even as a witness, my alarm would go off of, why is this person drawing so much attention to themselves? It's something that we didn't see too often or blatantly before. I mean, I left in, 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. And I was already getting uncomfortable with how the governing body was presenting themselves on the JW broadcasting. So I think examples like this probably would have just continued to make me feel uncomfortable. But I can't imagine being like hyped or pumped or like clapping along with this. Because I probably wouldn't even know what's going on, because who can even follow what this man's saying? Probably you're thinking the exact same thing about me right now. But then the narcissism, I guess, behind it, the arrogance, the pomposity, all of that would have definitely put me off even as a witness.
As for the other sheep, what will you need to do during that climatic time? Simply this: hide. That's right. At Isaiah 26:20, he wrote, enter your inner rooms, and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself for a brief moment until the wrath has passed by. It will be hide and seek. You will hide and they will seek to find you, but they will not. Do you have anything to worry about? You have nothing to worry about. Nothing at all. Because Jehovah will never abandon you. There is no justifiable reason to worry about the future. Just be there, brothers and sisters, to enjoy it.
The governing body is sitting around their little meeting table, fully thinking that the JW.org logo that's on the table, that's the Avengers symbol. They are the Earth's greatest, mightiest heroes. You sheep, you don't have to worry about anything because the Avengers, me and the rest of the governing body members, we are going to come in and absolutely mess some people up. This is a fantasy of theirs that they're just freely giving to the world. This is the freest content ever. This is absolutely hysterical that they can go on about this. And then there at the very end, he says, there's no justifiable reason to worry about the future. I don't know when videos are getting released. It's hard to keep track. But anyway, I have a video coming out, or it's already released, about... Well, actually, it's kind of a second one, because I did one in the past before that. But just how silly and dangerous it is to have this mentality. As a Jehovah's Witness, you're being told right to your face from your leaders. You don't have to... there's no justifiable reason to worry about the future. Sit back. Relax. Don't do it. And don't do anything. Just hide. The Avengers will take care of the rest. And all you need to do is be there. It's not actively participating in your life. It's saying, all I gotta do is make it. I just gotta make it to tomorrow, and then everything's looking up. Everything's looking up tomorrow. I just don't get it. Like, do something, please. Just, it's that moment you have when you're mentally out but still going to meetings, and you hear something and it's triggering, and you just like start screaming to yourself, "Wake up!" And you just like can't even contain it. Anyway, I'm getting excited, but I have fancy bougie water that will always be my companion. Sorry, Zizi, I didn't mean any offense by that, but you don't speak English. Water does.